My name is Marcus. I'm 38 years old, and for nearly 2 decades my life has been tied to the sea. I serve as an officer in the United States Navy, a career built on discipline, endurance, and the steady hum of engines beneath the steel deck of the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln. The ship is more than steel and rivets. It is my second home. And my crewmates are my brothers. Each long patrol, stretching from 6 months to a year, pulls me away from shore, away from family, and away from the fragile comforts of civilian life. I've grown used to the endless days of drift, the roar of fighter jets, and the salty tang that seeps into every pore of my skin. But no voyage across the world's oceans prepared me for the storm waiting in my own life, the betrayal that would tear apart everything I thought unshakable. I was born in a small farming town in Oregon, where fields of barley stretched under wide gray skies. My childhood was neither rich nor kind. My parents, hardened farmers, always seemed to favor my younger brother, Ryan, 6 years my junior. He was the golden child, showered with new clothes, summer camps, and parental praise, while I made do with hand-me-downs and scraped together pocket money mowing neighbors' lawns. Yet I bore no outward resentment. I learned to move forward in silence. At 18, I enlisted in the Navy, determined to stand on my own feet and prove I could reach beyond the boundaries of the farm. My parents called it a foolish choice, certain I would waste my life at sea. I didn't care. I needed to live my own life, to carve a path free from favoritism. The Navy gave me purpose, discipline, and a new family on deck. I rose steadily, from a lowly sailor to an officer trusted to lead. I took pride in watching F-18s thunder into the sky, knowing I was part of the machine that defended my country. Yet the cost was steep. Every deployment meant missing birthdays, anniversaries, and quiet evenings that can never be recaptured. I believed the sacrifices were worth it, so long as I had a harbor to return to. That harbor was Lily. We met 6 years ago in a coffee shop in San Diego. She was 32, an accountant with a warm smile and eyes that sparkled like the morning tide. I was captivated from the first moment, and within a year we were married. Our wedding was modest, attended by a handful of friends and shipmates, but to me it was the happiest day of my life. I thought I had finally found the anchor I needed. We bought a small house near the naval base with a military loan under my name, though I always told Lily it was our home. I sent most of my paycheck to our joint account, and she managed our expenses with her precise eye for numbers. We weren't wealthy, but we were steady, and I trusted her completely. Yet married life with a sailor is never simple. My deployment stretched long, and the loneliness weighed on Lily. Once she asked me, voice trembling with sadness, if I loved the sea more than I loved her. I laughed, hugged her tightly, and promised to make it up when I returned, and I tried whenever I was home. I fixed the kitchen shelves, took her to her favorite restaurants, and held her during quiet nights. But time was always short, and soon I would board the ship again, leaving her with only promises. Before my last deployment, a 10-month patrol in the Pacific, I sensed a shift. Lily was distant, her habits changing in subtle ways that unsettled me. When she saw me off that morning at the port, her hug felt cold, her eyes devoid of warmth. "Take care, Marcus," she said, before turning away quickly. I boarded the ship with a heavy heart, convincing myself it was only temporary sadness, that love could weather the storm of distance. 7 months into the patrol, the truth crashed into me. I was in the command center late at night, the green glow of computer screens reflecting my weary face, when a new email appeared. The subject line was stark. "We need to talk." I opened it, my pulse pounding as if facing an emergency drill. Lily's words sliced through me with merciless precision. She had filed for divorce. She said she could no longer live with a husband who was always a shadow at sea. She had withdrawn $20,000 from our joint account and was already living with someone else. She told me not to contact her. I read the email again and again, each line a dagger in my chest. 4 years of marriage reduced to a few sentences. I felt the deck tilt beneath me, though the ship was steady. I typed 2 words, understood, and sent them back. Then I shut the computer, stood, and walked out to the deck, the night wind cutting across my face. Around me, sailors laughed and swapped stories of wives and children. I stayed silent, swallowing the grief the sea had trained me to hide. As the waves churned below, I wondered what I had done wrong. Was I absent too long? Or simply not enough anger sparked in my chest? She had not only left me, she had taken money. And worst of all, she had chosen someone else while I was thousands of miles from shore. I gripped the railing, my knuckles white, and told myself I would endure. I still had 3 months left before we returned to port. The storm inside me would not break me. When the USS Abraham Lincoln finally docked after 10 grueling months, the morning was foggy and heavy, as if the sky itself carried the weight pressing on my chest. Families crowded the pier, arms open, laughter spilling into the salty air. Children leapt into their fathers' arms, wives clung to husbands, and for a moment the world seemed full of warmth. But I walked off quietly, my backpack slung over one shoulder, no one waiting for me. Lily's cold email still haunted me, every word echoing like the hollow clang of a bell. I drove straight to the house in San Diego, the home I once thought of as our sanctuary. The porch was dust-coated, the front door ajar, hinges creaking as I pushed it open. What met me inside was emptiness. The furniture was gone, the sofa where we had watched movies, the dining table where I dreamed of family meals. The painting we hung together all vanished. Only scraps remained: a broken mug, a crumpled blanket, a stack of old bills. The musty air smelled like abandonment. In the bedroom, the closet was stripped bare except for a few of my shirts swaying lifelessly. It no longer felt like a home, only a tomb of memories I could not touch. I walked out with a hollow heart and pointed my car north, toward Oregon. I wanted answers, or at least a fragment of familiarity. The long drive carried me through golden fields of barley, the same ones I had run through as a boy. But instead of comfort, they brought back memories of being overlooked, memories of Ryan always receiving more while I was told to fend for myself. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, praying that my parents, despite everything, might show me some kindness in this darkest hour. When I arrived at the family's weathered wooden house, the sun was setting, casting a red glow across the fields. Laughter spilled from inside, and a car I didn't recognize sat in the yard. I froze when the door opened, and Lily stepped out. My heart lurched, and then stopped altogether when I saw who followed her: Ryan. He wore his familiar smug smile, his arm wrapped around her waist, their laughter echoing together as if I had never existed. They got into the car and drove away, leaving me trembling in the shadows. I stormed into the house, rage boiling through me like a tidal wave. My parents sat calmly in the living room, my father with a newspaper, my mother knitting. Their faces showed no surprise, only a flicker of irritation at my intrusion. I demanded answers, my voice breaking with fury. How could they allow Ryan and Lily to betray me like this? My father lowered his paper, eyes cold, and said words that seared into me. "It's done, Marcus." Lily needed someone who was there, not a man lost at sea. My mother nodded, her voice as sharp as winter frost. "Ryan is good to her. He's better than you, always gone. You were foolish. You couldn't keep your wife. Deal with it yourself." The contempt in their eyes gutted me more deeply than any storm at sea. My parents, who should have defended me, had once again chosen Ryan, just as they had when I was a boy, giving him cars, clothes, praise, while I shouldered responsibility alone. I reminded them I had sent money home for years, only to watch them funnel it into Ryan's failures. None of it mattered. To them, I was always second best, and now even in my worst betrayal. They spat on my wounds. I staggered out of the house, the sunset blazing red like spilled blood. But inside I was cold, hollowed out, my wife in the arms of my brother, my parents siding with them, mocking me as if I deserved it. The people I had sacrificed for, loved, trusted, they had all turned their backs. I drove off, the road twisting through darkening fields, my mind replaying the cruel laughter, the harsh words. Yet beneath the anguish, a new flame flickered. They had taken my home, my wife, my family. But they would not take me. I was Marcus, a sailor forged in storms, and though they wanted me broken, I swore I would rise again. That night, I parked outside Ryan's small apartment building, a shabby place with peeling paint, and sat in silence. I could see a warm yellow light glowing from the third-floor window, shadows moving inside. My knuckles tightened around the steering wheel. I wasn't sure what I would do, but I knew I had to face them. I could not move forward without confronting the truth head-on. I climbed the narrow stairs and knocked on the door, the sound echoing like a challenge in the quiet hall. When it opened, Lily stood there, her eyes widened for a moment, then hardened with irritation. "Marcus, "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice steady but cold. Behind her, Ryan appeared with a beer bottle, smirk curling his lips as if my presence were a joke. "Big brother," he drawled. "Long time no see." I felt my blood boil, but I steadied my voice. "We need to talk." I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, the air heavy with the stench of cheap beer and perfume. The apartment was small, cluttered, and suffocating. But it wasn't the mess that sickened me. It was the realization that this place had replaced the home I once built with Lily. My wife of 4 years now lived here with my brother, as though everything we had shared had been nothing more than a temporary arrangement. Lily crossed her arms, glaring at me as though I were the intruder. "You couldn't keep me." "Marcus," she said, her voice sharp, every word cutting deeper than a blade. "You were always gone, always on that ship. Ryan was here. He understands me. He cares for me. What do you even know about me anymore?" Her words struck with cruel precision. I wanted to scream, to tell her how I had sacrificed years at sea, sleepless nights, and endless miles away from home so she could live comfortably, so we could have a future. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I stared at her, my heart breaking all over again. "And that justifies betraying me with my brother?" I asked quietly. She smirked without hesitation. "You're useless, Marcus. You don't deserve me." Ryan laughed then, wrapping an arm around her waist with mocking triumph. "Give it up, brother. You lost. Lily's happy with me now. Go back to your ship and leave us alone." I looked at him, the younger brother I had once protected, the boy who always took more than he earned, who basked in our parents' favor while I labored in silence. His smirk was the same one I had seen since childhood, but now it was crowned with the ultimate theft, my wife. "You think this makes you better than me?" I asked, voice steady despite the storm rising in me. "You're nothing but a leech. You've lived off Mom and Dad your whole life, off the money I sent home, and now you've taken the woman I loved. Is this what you're proud of?" Ryan's smile faltered for just a second, but Lily rushed to his defense, her voice shrill. "Don't insult him. Ryan's a real man, not like you. You cling to that ship because you've got nothing else." I turned my gaze on her, the woman I once promised to cherish forever. I thought of the vows we exchanged, the quiet mornings drinking coffee together, the dreams we whispered at night. "You told me you loved me," I said softly. "You promised you would wait, and now you're standing here beside my brother, calling me a failure. Have you ever stopped to think that maybe you're the one who's wrong?" Her eyes flickered, but not with remorse. They were cold, unyielding. "I don't love you anymore, Marcus. I'm happy with Ryan. Leave." Her words landed like a final blow. I had braced myself for this confrontation, but the reality was harsher than anything I could have imagined. Ryan raised his beer bottle like a mock toast. "You heard her. Big brother, get out." I said nothing more. I turned, walked out, and let the door slam shut behind me. The sound echoed down the hallway like the full stop at the end of a chapter I had never wanted to write. Outside, the night air cut against my skin like ice, but I felt numb, hollowed out. I had faced them, looked into their eyes, and seen nothing but betrayal. Driving away. The Oregon streets blurred past in streaks of shadow and light. My heart was heavy, but I refused to let it drown me. I had lost my wife, my brother, and my family, but I was still standing, and I would keep standing, no matter how alone I felt. The weeks that followed were consumed by the crushing process of divorce. In a quiet lawyer's office, I sat across from a stack of papers that reduced my marriage to a set of cold numbers and property values. Lily's lawyer demanded an equal split of assets, the house I had bought with my military loan under California law. It no longer mattered that it was in my name. It was community property. The court ruled Lily would receive half the value, $150,000. On top of that, she would get $30,000 from our savings, even though she had already taken $20,000 before sending her email. I signed the papers with a trembling hand but a blank expression. At the courthouse, I saw her one final time. She wore a red dress, her makeup perfect, her face proud and unyielding. She didn't look at me once as she signed away our marriage. I didn't ask for a word of explanation. I'd already heard enough. Later, I learned she and Ryan moved to Miami, spending the settlement money on a lavish lifestyle. I didn't care anymore. My ties to them were cut, severed cleanly like a rope snapped in two. I walked out of the courthouse into the blinding San Diego sun, stripped of my house, my money, and my faith in love. But I still had one thing left myself, and I vowed no one would take that from me again. The months after the divorce were the bleakest I had ever endured. I transferred to Norfolk, Virginia, near another naval base, selling the San Diego house to satisfy the court's ruling. What little money I had left went into buying a modest apartment, just a single bedroom with a small kitchen and a narrow balcony overlooking the sea. It was far from the dream Lily and I once built together. But it was mine, untouched by her shadow or Ryan's smirk. I poured myself into work. The Navy had always been my anchor, and now it became my lifeline. I mentored younger sailors, trained new recruits, and devoted myself to the discipline that had carried me this far. My crew noticed the change quieter, more reserved, but sharper, more focused. My commanding officer called me into his office one evening and informed me I had earned a promotion. His words, simple and steady, gave me the first flicker of pride I had felt in months. For a moment, I remembered who I was outside of betrayal, a man who had built his life on duty and strength. But life wasn't only about the Navy. I needed something more, a way to remind myself that I wasn't alone in the world. I began volunteering at a local veteran center, helping former service members reintegrate into civilian life. Many of them had lost everything: families, homes, even hope, yet they still carried on. Their resilience reminded me I wasn't the only one standing at the edge of despair. One older veteran named Joe told me something I will never forget, Marcus. Life's like the sea. Sometimes the waves knock you under, but as long as you're breathing, you've still got a chance to keep swimming. His words planted themselves deep inside me, a quiet promise I carried through each passing day. I also began to find comfort in simple routines. Every morning, I jogged along the shoreline, the salty air filling my lungs, the rhythm of my steps syncing with the steady heartbeat of the ocean. I taught myself to cook, fumbling through scrambled eggs, burnt pasta, and eventually small victories like homemade stew. I made friends with neighbors, a kind elderly couple who often invited me over for coffee, and a young sailor who sought advice about his future. These small connections, these ordinary moments, stitched together a new life, lighter and freer than I thought possible. One of the most difficult but necessary decisions I made was to sever ties with my parents. For years, I had supported them financially, paying their bills, covering their medical costs, even sending money for repairs around the farm. I did it because I thought it was my duty, even when their gratitude never came. But after watching them side with Ryan and spit on my pain, I knew I could no longer sacrifice for people who valued me so little. I canceled the automatic transfers, locked the accounts, and cut the financial cord that had bound me for too long. Not long after, my mother called, her voice frantic. "Marcus, the electricity bill hasn't been paid. Your father's medications are running out. We're behind. Please help us." I gripped the phone, remembering her cold words in the living room when I begged for understanding. "I can't anymore," I told her, my voice calm but firm. "You can't do this to us," she pleaded. "We need you." "You'll manage," I said, and hung up. My hands trembled, but for the first time in years, I felt free. The weight of obligation lifted from my shoulders like chains finally broken. I knew they would struggle without my help. They had grown used to leaning on me, funneling my sacrifices into Ryan's comforts. But this time, I refused to be the crutch. I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply unwilling to keep pouring myself into a family that had never poured anything back into me. Standing on the balcony of my apartment that evening, the horizon glowed gold as the sun dipped into the sea. I realized I no longer carried the burden of betrayal as heavily. The Navy was still my duty, but I had found pieces of myself outside of it, a man who could stand on his own, who no longer measured his worth by the approval of a wife, a brother, or parents. I had begun to heal, quietly and steadily, one sunrise at a time. A year passed before the past came knocking again. By then, my life had settled into a rhythm. I rose early, jogged by the water at 600 a.m., reported for duty, trained new sailors, and ended my evenings either at the Veteran Center or cooking a quiet meal alone. My small apartment, once barren, grew into a refuge. A bookshelf held a handful of novels. The balcony hosted a potted plant gifted by the elderly couple next door, and the faint sound of waves drifting through the window reminded me that even storms at sea eventually calmed. I thought little about Lily or Ryan anymore. They were ghosts, and I preferred to let them remain that way. Then, one evening, As I returned from the Veterans Center, my phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. The name that appeared on the screen made my chest tighten. "It's Lily. Can we talk, please?" Attached was a photo that jolted me with disbelief. Her once proud face was gaunt, her hair unkempt, her eyes shadowed by exhaustion. Dark bruises marred her arm, vivid against her pale skin. I stared at the picture for a long time, not with longing, but with a strange mixture of shock and pity. The confident woman who once mocked me in court was gone, replaced by someone I could barely recognize. I typed a single reply, "Go ahead," almost instantly. My phone rang. I hesitated, then answered. Her voice was fragile, a broken echo of the Lily I once knew. "Marcus," she whispered, "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I want to come back." I said nothing, listening as her words tumbled out between sobs. She explained that Ryan had become an alcoholic, prone to rage and violence. He gambled away what remained of their money, leaving them evicted and crammed into a rundown motel. "The bruises," she admitted, "came from him. I realize now you were good to me." She wept. "You were steady, loyal. I regret leaving you. Please, give me another chance." I listened in silence, my heart unmoved. Memories of her cold words at the courthouse burned in my mind. How she had stood tall, dressed in red, declaring me useless, demanding her half of everything I had earned. I thought of Ryan, laughing as he wrapped an arm around her, raising a beer in mock victory. Now both of them had fallen into the pit they dug for themselves. When she paused, waiting for me to respond, I finally spoke, my voice calm. "Lily, you made your choice. I'm no longer your harbor." She begged, her words desperate, but I felt nothing. No anger, no desire, no sorrow, only closure. I hung up, letting her voice dissolve into silence. For the first time since that storm began, I felt completely free. In the days that followed, I heard from my Uncle John, my father's older brother. He told me my parents had fallen into financial ruin since I stopped supporting them. They had been forced to sell a portion of their land to pay off debts and had moved into a smaller, run-down house. Ryan and Lily, he said, were still mired in misery, trapped by his addictions and her regret. I listened quietly, then thanked him, but offered nothing more. I no longer carried resentment toward any of them. Instead, I felt a quiet pity. They had chosen their paths, and I had chosen mine. My own life was moving forward. I earned another promotion, rising among the ranks to become one of the most respected officers at the base. The responsibility was heavy, but it was the kind of weight I welcomed, beyond duty. I continued to volunteer, finding fulfillment in helping others rebuild their lives. I discovered new friends who became my true family. Joe, the veteran with endless stories, the young sailor I mentored who reminded me of myself at 18, and the elderly couple who treated me like a son. I no longer sought validation from the people who had abandoned me. I no longer measured my worth by those who mocked or betrayed me. I learned to measure it by the lives I touched, by the sailors who looked to me for guidance, and by the peace I found within myself each morning as the sun rose over the sea. Seasons shifted as quietly as the tide, and with them, I noticed the scars of betrayal fading into the background of my life. They did not vanish, no wound that deep ever truly disappears, but they dulled, becoming reminders rather than chains. Each morning as I jogged by the shoreline, I felt lighter, as though every footfall pressed those memories deeper into the sand where the waves could wash them away. There were still nights when the past crept into my dreams. I would see Lily's cold smile, Ryan's smug grin, my parents' contemptuous eyes. I would wake with a clenched jaw and sweat on my brow. But instead of drowning in those feelings, I learned to breathe through them. I reminded myself that I was not defined by their betrayal, but by how I chose to rise from it. The Navy continued to challenge me, and I welcomed it. I took younger sailors under my wing, teaching them not just the technical skills of life at sea, but the resilience it required. They looked at me with respect, but also curiosity, sensing the weight I carried. I never told them the full story. Instead, I shared lessons disguised as metaphors about storms and survival, about not steering your ship based on someone else's compass. In their eager eyes, I found a reflection of the young man I once was, hungry to prove himself, unaware of how cruel the world could sometimes be. Outside of work, my circle of support grew. Joe, the old veteran, became like a mentor even though I outranked him in life experience at sea. He had fought his own wars, lost his own family, and carried his own ghosts, yet he still laughed easily, teaching me that humor could be a shield against despair. The elderly couple next door checked in on me as if I were their son, leaving casseroles by my door or calling to remind me not to skip dinner, and the young sailor I mentored often came by, eager to learn more, his youthful energy a reminder that not everything in life was loss. Gradually, I began to allow myself to imagine a future untethered from pain. I didn't rush into love again, but I stopped being afraid of it. I realized that love, at its best, should never feel like a battlefield where one person must constantly prove their worth. If it came again, it would be with someone who saw me clearly not as a provider to exploit or a shadow to mock, but as a man worthy of respect. Cutting ties with my parents had been one of the hardest decisions of my life. Yet as the months passed, I felt its wisdom more deeply. Uncle John told me they struggled, clinging to their dwindling pride while Ryan begged them for help they could no longer give. I did not rejoice in their hardship, nor did I extend my hand. I had finally understood that family is not defined by blood, but by loyalty, respect, and love. Those who strip you down do not deserve to be called family, no matter the shared name. One evening, standing on my balcony, the horizon aflame with sunset, I realized I was no longer haunted by the question of why me for years. I had tortured myself with doubts. Was I gone too long, not good enough, too focused on my duty, but staring at the endless expanse of the sea? I finally understood sometimes people betray not because you lack, but because they lack. Lily's heart had been restless, Ryan's ambition shallow, my parents' love conditional. None of that was my fault. My only failure would have been to let their choices define me. That night, as the stars appeared one by one above the water, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. I had been stripped of nearly everything: my wife, my family's support, even my house, but in losing them, I found something greater. I found myself, stronger, steadier, and freer than I had ever been. The following year brought new challenges and new triumphs. My duties expanded, and with them came heavier responsibility. I was entrusted with leading critical operations, overseeing young sailors whose futures would be shaped by the discipline and values I instilled in them. Each success, each promotion, felt like proof that I had not been broken, that the man once mocked as useless had become a leader others trusted with their lives. Beyond the Navy, I deepened my role at the Veterans Center. The work grounded me. Many who came through those doors had endured their own storms, losing families, battling addictions, wandering through life with invisible wounds. I recognized myself in them, not in their details, but in the shared ache of loss and the struggle to stand again. Helping them find work, reconnect with loved ones, or simply rediscover dignity became as meaningful to me as any mission at sea. It reminded me daily that healing was not only possible, but necessary. Sometimes, stories of Lily and Ryan still reached me through scattered whispers. They had not escaped the spiral. Ryan's gambling and drinking worsened, dragging them deeper into poverty. Lily was seen working odd jobs, her once proud demeanor eroded into exhaustion. For a brief moment, the younger version of me might have savored their downfall, but now I felt only a detached pity. They had made their choices, and I had made mine. Their lives no longer intersected with mine in any way that mattered. My parents, too, struggled. The farm shrank, debts mounted, and without my financial support, they were forced into humility they had never imagined. I did not return to them, not out of vengeance, but out of self-respect. They had chosen Ryan time and time again, even when it meant crushing me. To step back into their lives would have been to deny the lessons I had learned. I carried no anger anymore, only clarity. Some bridges, once burned, should never be rebuilt. Life, once filled with anguish, became rich in small joys. I learned to savor the rhythm of ordinary days, the taste of a meal I cooked myself, the sound of laughter from neighbors down the hall, the quiet satisfaction of a sailor I mentored, receiving his first promotion. These were not the grand milestones I once imagined, but they were steady, meaningful, and real. One evening, after a long day, I walked along the beach as twilight folded into night. The sea breeze was cool, and the horizon glimmered faintly under the fading sun. I thought about everything I had endured: the betrayal, the courtroom, the severed ties, and realized those storms had reshaped me into someone stronger than I had ever been before. I was no longer the Marcus who begged for love that wasn't freely given. I was no longer the son desperate for his parents' approval or the husband blind to his wife's drifting heart. I was simply myself, steady as the tide, proud of what I had become. That night on the sand, I allowed myself a rare smile. My life had not unfolded as I once dreamed. I had been tested by cruelty, stripped of nearly everything, and left standing alone. But from that solitude, I had built a life worth living, one anchored not in others' approval but in my own strength and purpose. I had survived the storm, and now I was steering my own course. Another year passed, and with it came more quiet stability. I no longer marked my life by the betrayals of the past, but by the victories of the present. My apartment by the sea became a home, modest but warm. My mornings began with the steady rhythm of running shoes against sand at 6:30 a.m., and my evenings often ended with laughter at the Veteran Center or the hum of stories shared over coffee with neighbors who had become family. In the Navy, my reputation continued to grow. Younger sailors looked to me not just for orders, but for guidance, for the lessons only hardship could teach. I told them that strength was not measured by the medals on your chest or the rank on your shoulder, but by how you carried yourself when everything you loved was stripped away. Some of them understood immediately. Others would learn in time, just as I had. News of Ryan and Lily reached me less and less, until eventually it stopped altogether. To me, their silence was not emptiness, but closure. They had chosen their lives, and I had chosen mine. My parents, too, faded from my world. I heard through Uncle John that they had grown bitter in their reduced circumstances, still clinging to the belief that Ryan would someday succeed. Perhaps they still blamed me for withdrawing my support. Perhaps they regretted their choices. I no longer wondered. Their opinions no longer held power over me. One evening, I stood once more on my balcony, the sky painted gold by the setting sun. The sea stretched endlessly before me, calm yet powerful, timeless in its quiet strength. I thought back to everything I had endured, the betrayal of a wife, the treachery of a brother, the cruelty of parents who should have loved me. I thought of the empty house in San Diego, the courthouse where Lily looked at me as though I were nothing, the cold dismissal from the people who gave me life. And then I thought of where I stood now. I was whole. I had rebuilt from ashes, not to prove anything to those who had abandoned me, but to live true to myself. I no longer defined myself by who left, but by who remained my crew, my friends, my neighbors, and above all, myself. The greatest lesson life had taught me was simple yet profound: people may betray you, but their choices do not define you. The storms that knock you down can also teach you how to rise. The family that turns its back can show you how to build a new one, and the love that abandons you can remind you that your worth was never theirs to measure. I smiled into the breeze that night, breathing in the salt air, feeling lighter than I had in years. I was Marcus, a sailor, a survivor, and a man who had finally found peace not in others, but within my own heart. If you've followed me through this journey, I hope my story reminds you that even in the darkest betrayal, you can rise again. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what storms have you overcome in your own life?